Hello, I hope everything is working for today's live. Let me know if you can hear me and if you can see me. The internet for some reason was feeling a bit slow today and I hope it will all go fine. But in case it stops, just try to refresh the page or try to refresh your Instagram feed and I hope I will come up again. but for now, fingers crossed, everything will go well. Hello to everyone who's tuning in. Hello Mary, hello Nadine. And anyone who's on Facebook, let me know if you can hear me. And Instagram actually as well. I should have a little board saying, can you hear me? Apparently last week there was some problem on Instagram. So if you can put a heart and or a thumb up to confirm that you can hear me, that would be really nice. I hope you survived yesterday heat in the UK, if you're in the UK. Thank you very much. You can hear me on Instagram. If you could let me know if everything is fine on Facebook, that would be great. I hope you all survived yesterday's heat and today apparently it's going to be a bit cooler, so time to recover. Okay, today's topic is going to be dynamics, and that was inspired by a question from one of my Instagram followers. Actually, a few questions about practicing dynamics, playing dynamics in an exam, and a few more that I will be answering in today's live. And it seemed from that little conversation that we have that there are two quite distinctive opinions among teachers and players on when to learn the dynamics, when to add dynamics to a new piece that you're learning, and quite a big group of people seem to believe that you should practice everything else first and then add dynamics only at the very end, like an icing on the cake. And the other group is in favor of practicing dynamics straight away when you're learning the piece, when learning the notes. And I'm not going to keep you in unknown for this one. I'm in the group which is for icing on the cakes, not only because I like cakes, but I believe that especially on the harp, when we got so much to deal with when learning the notes, we shouldn't try to jump to learning the dynamics too soon. It's almost like adding, I don't know, on the harp and on the piano and a few other instruments where you have to learn playing hands, when you play with both hands doing independent things, you very often are told by your teacher to practice hands separately first for most of the pieces. And I think just as if you wouldn't push yourself to do hands together when you can't really play them on their own, I wouldn't try to add dynamics, because it's another thing to think about when you're still on the stage of learning the notes. So that's my thinking, and when I teach, I sort of try to draw the plan. It also, of course, depends on the piece, but notes would come first. Just after that, it's kind of intertwined fingering. And deciding on fingering is quite a big part of playing a piece on the harp, so that takes quite a while, and you don't really want to experiment with dynamics as well when you're still trying to find out your correct fingerings. A few other things. Rhythm is really important with most of the pieces. Pedals and lever changes, if you have any in the piece, or if you play the harp, which allows lever and pedal changes or pedal changes. Then being able to play in one steady tempo is another really important one, especially with beginners, but for everyone really. With very long pieces it can be really tempting to play the easier sections faster and harder sections slower, and that's definitely not the right moment to add the dynamics when you can't have the whole piece going in one steady pace. Ideally you should be able also to count out loud while playing. If you can't count out loud, then probably you're not quite ready to add another dimension to your playing, I would say. And last thing, although I'm sure you can think of many others that you should be able to add to the piece before adding the dynamics, but the last one on my list today is speeding up the piece and trying to get it up to tempo while playing with all loud dynamics preferably. Because if you can play it in one dynamics faster, you will probably want to add the dynamics while playing the piece slower, and it hardly makes any sense when you're pieces at a slow tempo to slow it down even more to add dynamics, in my opinion. I'm actually hoping, I'm not trying to preach, I'm not saying that this approach is the only right one. I'm hoping to open some kind of a discussion here, and I was really glad to see some interesting comments on Facebook, including one from someone who said that they much more preferred one approach over the one of their teachers, or someone discovering that as they progress in their journey they are more inclined to one approach than the other. So of course it also depends on the pieces. Some easier pieces, when you're more advanced, some of the pieces that you played at the beginning, you will be able to sight read them and add dynamics straight away, because that's kind of the point of being able to sight read pieces well, being able to add dynamics as you go. And some other pieces, maybe orchestral pieces, will require different sort of practice, but it all depends. So I'm really hoping to hear some more opinions on that. I'll just explain you my approach to dynamics and to teaching dynamics, and I think that approach is quite a good one for beginners, because as I said, there's so much going on the harp that you really can't wait for that. Okay, so one more question in that message that I got was how to make harp sound really loud. The argument was that it doesn't have, I think that's what I understood, that it doesn't have as big dynamic range as other instruments, so it can be quite hard. So how to make it sound loud without sounding rough, and how to play piano not too softly so it's still audible. And the concern was, what if I get marked down in an exam if I'm playing too softly? So the answer to all these questions, in my opinion, is articulation. So it's that movement that I always teach to my students, to press on the string before you play, and then close your finger inside the hand after you play the note. I think it's the key, both playing loud note which would have a pleasant sound, pleasant color, but also playing softly. I think it's exactly the same movement, pressing the string, and the release is just slightly different, but you can still close your hand close your finger inside the hand for a nicer sound. Some people think that if you want to play loud, you have to really make a big movement as well. You have to pull your hands away from the strings for a bigger sound. I think we discussed that in one of the previous lives. I'll try to find which one was it and put a link in the description to this one. But I'm not a big fan of big moves with your hands. I think the strength of the sound comes from the fingers, comes from that pressing on the strings and closing them. And that's why I'm also very keen on all the exercises when you're practicing the strength of your fingers while holding on to the other notes. And that's why I also encourage all my students to play pieces when they first learn them with all loud dynamics, forte or mezzo forte at least, because then they practice doing that movement. And also I think on the harp as well as in many other instruments, playing quietly is more difficult. Even though it's the same movement, you need to have more control on the sound. So I would start with all loud dynamics and then add all the lower levels, because that will require from you even more control of the fingers. So that's how I would work. First, make sure that this movement is there, which is much easier with the loud dynamics. That gives your fingers also the nice feeling of confidence and good grip on the strings. I really like knowing where my fingers are going. Somehow, if I would be playing really, really quietly, I don't feel they are as confident. And something mentioned in one of the comments as well, especially in fast piano sections, you really need to practice them loud, practice them with different rhythms to make sure that they don't get, that they are still very clear and very rhythmic, because otherwise if you don't do this work, it's quite easy to get them being very mushy and a bit messy. Let me check on my list, because there's lots of stuff I would like to share with you today. I hope I'm not going too fast. Let me know if you have any, if you would like me to repeat anything or to be more clear on the points. On the other hand, it seems that I've been talking already for 10 minutes, so hopefully you will catch all that. So playing all loud allows you to verify whether you're really articulating, closing your fingers and pressing on the strings. And then just trying to read my notes. About the movement of the hand, I just wanted to tell you a short anecdote. I'm not quite sure which of our teachers told us that. I think I know who was, but I don't want to throw names around. Maybe if you remember, you were with me in that class, you can confirm. But they said that they were in a rehearsal where the conductor was insisting that the harps play louder and louder. So they did whatever they were doing, pressing on the strings, really going for it. But the conductor still kept wanting more and more, and in the end the harpist was like, oh, okay, I'll put a show for him, for the conductor. So what they did was doing this all massive movement and pulling paces, like showing that they are really going for it, and the sound was more or less the same, but the conductor was happy. So that's just an anecdote about how to make harp sound louder in the orchestra. But this is more a joke. Don't take it as a serious life tip, please. Other important things when you're practicing the dynamics, and you will see all those in the PDF file that you can download from my website. That will be the link in the bio for Instagram and the link in the live description for Facebook. The download file will be there just after the live. I put it up, but then I saw a typo. Actually, not a typo, it was a bit of a mistake in the answers, because there are questions and answers in this one. So I need to correct it, and I put it up a few minutes after the live is finished. But a few more tips which you will also find in that PDF: how to practice dynamics when you practice it after practicing all the other things, and how to make it really clear, really convincing and accurate. So when you have a piece on the page, usually you just have dynamics written in whenever there is a change. There are sort of like road signs. So to make sure that, for example, when you play forte, that you stay forte all the way until the change is to be made, I would put more road signs for myself. So write the dynamics even in every bar, and if they are long bars, even every twice in a bar. So I would just literally write for myself forte, F, F, F in all the places as soon as I might forget them. And it's surprising how quick you can forget the dynamics, or how quickly you can start thinking that you're playing with one dynamics and you actually aren't. Especially with forte and all the dynamics at the end of the range. You need to reinvent that feeling that you're playing loud, or quiet, because the tendency for us is try to get again to the middle and play sort of mezzo-pianish, mezzo-fortish, and that's not what will really convince your audience or examiner or whoever is listening. Then the next thing, in case of long changes of dynamics, so for example, if you've got a diminuendo which is written across, let's say, 2 bars, and let's imagine that diminuendo would be from forte to piano, let's say. So of course we all know that we just have to gradually get quieter and quieter, but to make sure that we don't go too far, for example, if we have a pianissimo at the end, at sometime after that diminuendo, you don't want to go too quiet. So in that case I would space out the dynamic changes and try to write between the two points some intermediate levels. For example, if we had forte and piano, I would write between them mezzo forte and mezzo piano. I think there's also something like FP, which is something right in the middle, but if that's just 2 bars, I would add 2 extra points of dynamics just to make sure that at this point I should be at mezzo forte, at this point I should be at mezzo piano, and then that makes, instead of one big change, you have small changes to which you have to stick, and that's much easier to keep track on what you're really doing. And one last tip for something you may also encounter in the pieces, which is subito changes, sudden changes of dynamics, especially when you're going from playing really loudly to suddenly playing PP. It's quite a common effect in many musical pieces. So I would say first try a lot playing all the way to the end of the forte dynamics, all the way to the last note before that change, and stop and don't do anything else. So make sure all the notes going to the end are all out, because we as performers somehow anticipate what's coming after and the audience doesn't. But if we unconsciously start getting softer towards the end of that forte dynamics, we're going to spoil that effect for our audience. So we need to play as if there was nothing happening afterwards, okay? So practice playing really, really loud, all the notes going really loud. If you imagine you have a machine which is picking your volume, you will want that machine to be on the same level, to go with those little dots all the way at the same level. And then try to carry on, but still stop after that loudest note. So let's imagine I'll be making something up, but let me show you what I mean. So let's say I'm playing something like, and the next beat. So I would take a few seconds pause, rest, just to have this really, really definite cut. Yeah, and then you can make that cut smaller and smaller after you're getting more used to play loud all the way until the end. Yeah. Another thing which you can do to make that effect even clearer, if it's possible, if your left hand is free, you can discreetly dump the lowest strings on the harp, because then you will get rid of all that resonance that you've created by playing really loud. Because then the piano after that will sound much softer and will be much more surprising. So just a quick movement on the strings, on the metal strings. I would say as you begin to play the first notes of the piano section, because unless this is what's intended in the music, to have a big gap before, a gap of complete silence, but in most cases you have loudest, and then directly the quiet notes. So I would dump it at the same time as you start playing the quiet notes, not to create any artificial silence. Okay, right. Any questions, any comments? I'll just have a quick look at what's happening on Instagram and on Facebook. No questions, so I'll move on to playing a piece for today. There will be a piece today, because I think that's one piece from graded exams syllabus which can be tricky in an exam, because it starts very softly, and I think that's why some people might be concerned, what if I get marked down in an exam if I'm playing too quietly. That piece, I'm sure many of you know it, is Charlotte in Spring. I think it's list B from ABRSM syllabus, extremely popular. No lever changes, no pedal changes, so that's one step less when you're working towards your dynamics. And maybe before I say more about this piece, I will play it to you, so those of you who don't know it will be able to hear it. And I realized that both my laptop and the phone, from when the live is coming, will probably flatten the dynamics. They will probably make the quiet dynamics go up a bit and louder dynamics go down a bit. But I'm recording this live, the audio from this live, on another device as well, which I hope shouldn't do any sorts of tricks like that. So when you will want to listen to that live again, I recommend that you go on the website. That's the same link, where I will upload the same video, but with audio swapped from the one from the recorder. So hopefully the dynamics will be more accurate when you listen them, not through Facebook, not from Instagram, but after post-processing, if I can say so. Let me just organize myself with the music stand. I could probably play that piece from memory, but it would be a shame if I made mistakes playing grade 1 piece. That would be a real shame. Just a second, because we've got lots of stuff here and we don't want any of this to go down. You can still see me? Yeah, you can still see me, and I hope I can see the music. So, Fiona Clifton Walker, Charlotte in Spring. That was a piece. I must say it's awfully hard to think so much about the dynamics while playing a piece, even if it's a simple piece. And while I was playing, I actually thought about a few more things that I could tell you about this one and how to approach it, especially in an exam situation. So, with this piece, the first advice I would have, since you are required to play 3 pieces in most exams, I would not play this one as the first piece. I would probably play it as the second out of the 3, because that's quite a nice combination to have a faster, maybe louder piece before and after, and that one in the middle as sort of a quiet moment. I think I wouldn't play it as the first piece, although you can also choose to play scales, you can choose to have sight reading, so the examiner already may know what is your dynamic range, what he can expect. It's likely that they will hear other instruments before you, not harps, so if they heard trombone, they might need some time to adjust to the dynamic range of the harp. So I think the first advice would be, don't play it as the first thing if you're in your exam, if a piece starts as quietly as this one. The second tip would be, give yourself plenty of time and really wait for silence in the room before playing a piece which starts quietly as this one. So there is no danger that people will be busy shuffling papers and things like that, and they will not hear you starting the piece. That would be a real shame. Also, when there's a complete silence, their attention is more focused to hear those quiet notes. Let me check. Yeah. So when starting that piece, if you are worried that the sound will be too soft, that's exactly why articulation is so important, because pressing the strings will give you much different sound quality than not doing that, as opposed to then you get a sound which is just barely passing on the string, and if an examiner hears the sound that doesn't have much substance in them, something which might have sounded like an accident accidentally touching wrong string, then they will maybe not they will mark you down, but they will feel quite uneasy. They will be not sure how confident you are about playing, and so much in performance is about how confident the person performing seems. And also pressing on the strings will help you if you are very nervous, if your hands are shaking, for example, and you want to just approach the strings like that. There is a danger that by shaking you will not get you will touch other strings or something. But when you have a moment of just press the strings before, it's I think it's safer feeling for you. Don't hang on the strings too long. It doesn't need to be anything like, oh, I'm hanging on to the strings and waiting for the silence, because that looks a bit awkward, I must say. So wait for the silence, sit at the harp, then check your levers. That's quite a good one for this piece. And then put your fingers on the harp, squeeze gently, play. Don't spend ages doing that, because that will make you more stressed, I think. Other things about Charlotte. yeah, it's quite easy. Now that I was playing that piece, I could feel myself getting carried away with that first phrase, which still needs to be quiet. So I would really go for that tip, writing in the dynamics and practicing not going overly emotional with that first phrase, because there's so much more to come, and if you use everything at the beginning, then there's nothing left. Any more advice? I think I said that already. And I was thinking maybe about saying some of the things that you can work on in this piece before you get down to working on dynamics. So definitely making sure all your rhythms are correct. We've got semi-quavers, quavers and crotchets here. So you need to make sure that your quavers from the beginning are exactly the length of 2 semi-quavers that you will be using later in the piece. So that needs to be something that you will think about straight away. And that's connected with being able to play whole tempo in a steady, whole piece in a steady tempo. The problem with dynamics is that most people will naturally play things slower if they are meant to be quieter. And vice versa, we will play pieces much faster if we are told to play them loud. That's just something which happens, and we are very often not aware of that unless we have metronome or we have a teacher putting pencil on the music stand to help you keeping the rhythm. So make sure that you are very clear with your speed before you add the dynamics, and practice a lot with the metronome to keep it steady. And I know I'm seeing suddenly lots of emojis flying on Facebook. And play it all out, especially those quick turns there. You want to make sure that your second finger is really clear on those turns, and anything like that, articulating those middle fingers, making sure that they are heard. Okay, I think that's everything. I didn't see any questions, but you can always post them under the live and I will do my best to answer that. Anything that you would like me to continue about this in the next live, suggestions are also most welcome. And I'm wishing you a lovely, hopefully cool weekend, whatever you're doing, and see you next week at the same time.